Testing. There we go. All right, you'd think I would be testing this stuff beforehand. Sorry about that. I have been super busy today. It is Day of the Dead, so congratulations to everyone or happy Day of the Dead to everybody who's celebrating today. I have been very busy today. I've been out to the cemetery. I've been cooking. It's been a good time. I'm celebrating. But now I get to take a break from all of that and spend some time with you lovely, lovely people. Oh, there we go. Voice meter. Yes. So today's lesson, we're going to be diving into the idea of fixing bad arrangements. And by bad, I should more probably say troublesome. All right, so sometimes I'm sure we all have the experience of working on a new piece. And we're arranging it, and for whatever reason, it just doesn't work. I had this experience recently working on this piece right here. I wrote this yesterday. And some parts are better than others, but I'm having a lot of difficulty with certain areas, so now I need to start troubleshooting it and figuring out what works, what doesn't work, and how can I fix it. And I figured this would be a perfect opportunity to kind of share my process for all of that with you lovely people. So the first thing we're going to do, let's give this a quick listen to, see what we're working with, and then we can start diving a little bit deeper. Issue with finale? Yeah, I can't go back. Alright, so there we have it. There are definitely some troubling moments. Some of them having to deal more with Finale's playback engine, some of them dealing more with the arrangement. There's all kinds of issues going on here, and we need to figure out first, what are they? And then, of course, how can we fix them? So as you can see, I am working in Finale today. I'm not working in Cubase. Whenever I'm arranging or working with orchestrations, I prefer to do it with notation software. And for me, it's two reasons. One, I do not have a very powerful computer. So sometimes when I'm getting up to close to a couple dozen different tracks on Cubase, it starts to glitch and have all kinds of issues. Number two is that when I'm working with notation, I can visualize all of the different layers. And I can focus on the music itself. So I can, if I know I want the violin and cello to be playing the same part, I can just copy and paste. I wouldn't want to do that in Cubase because then they would have identical performances. I have to change it, all that stuff. I start to dive a little too deeply into the samples being used in Cubase. I don't have that issue with notation software. So those are the two main reasons why I prefer to do it in notation software. But really the big one is just so I don't go diving too deeply into the rabbit hole. So when we're trying to figure out what's working and what's not working, the first thing you're going to want to do is you want to break up the music into chunks. You want to chunk it up into different sections. That's going to help you kind of focus a little bit more on the material in front of you. It cleans things up a little bit so that you're not working on the whole piece at once. You're just working with section by section. Now, there are a couple different strategies you can use for breaking it into different sections. You can see I've got the notes here. These will be available after the stream. But there are a couple different strategies you can take. I'm sorry, I'm a little foggy-headed today. But there are a couple different strategies you can take to break up your music into different sections. I've got a couple of them written right here. You can focus on breaking every phrase into its own distinct section. So this music that we're working with today is something called binary form, which means it's A, B. All right, we have an A theme, then we have a B theme, then it's done. All right, in this case, we have A, A, B, B. So I have the A theme played once, then the A theme gets repeated, then we introduce the B theme, and then the B theme gets repeated. Each of those phrases are 8 bars long. So if I wanted to, I could break this up into 4 chunks, into 4 different phrases. Phrase A1, phrase A2, phrase B1, phrase B2. That is a completely valid strategy. Another one is to create a new section anytime you change textures. So in this piece, we could see first we have, and a texture is the number and types of layers that you're working with. For example, you could have melody plus chords, in this case, which is a homophonic chord progression. You could then switch in the next phrase to melody plus counter melody plus bass line, which is a polythematic texture. And you can kind of move that around. Another strategy is to switch based off of the new accompaniment. All right, so in this case, this is where we first see how I'm probably going to take it here, which is how we change the accompaniment style. So these first 4 measures, we have a solo viola performing the melody, and then kind of pulsing chords that come in and fade out. The chord comes in, then it fades back out. And then here we start changing more into we change into more of a sustained chord model, all right? There's not play the chord, rest, play the chord, rest. It's more chord, switch the voicing of the chord, chord, switch the voicing of the chord, different accompanimental styles. And this is probably actually what we're going to be working with today. All right, and the last strategy that I kind of recommend is you could switch anytime you want, switch themes. That would be a little daunting because it would take this entire piece and only break it up into 2 sections. The 2 first phrases of theme A and the 2 phrases of theme B, which is back here. So once you figure out what kind of strategy you want to use to break up your arrangement, the next step is to start taking notes on your sections. All right, so the first section, we're going to take notes on a couple different things. All right, I'm just going to open a text box here. All right, so section 1. We're going to say, first we need to know what measures it runs for. I'm going to go with measures 1 through 4. All right, after this, we want to figure out what's the overall energy level we want to introduce here. All right, and I'm not talking about objective. There's no objective, all right, well, we have all these elements, add them together, and now that is a 7.5 out of 10. That's not the kind of energy level I'm going for. I'm looking more, how does this section fit into the piece as general? All right, so for this one, I want a very intimate energy, possibly the most intimate section of the whole piece. All right, ooh, it looks like we're getting some questions. Hey, awesome. Welcome back, Jack. Thank you very much. Greeting from Canary Islands. Wow, awesome. That's far away. Yes, thank you. Welcome to the stream. As usual, if anyone has any questions, any comments, I've kind of got this lesson plan for what I want to tackle today. But based off the stream health, it doesn't look like that might be the most popular topic. So if there's anything you guys want to learn about, right? If there's anything you want to kind of veer off of and learn something new, let me know. I'd be more than happy to. But for the meantime, I'm just going to kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone because this is a piece that was commissioned and I need to clean it up. I wrote it yesterday. Now I need to start kind of making it sound better. But yeah, so there we go. Hey, welcome, Aditya. Welcome to the stream. All right, so first things first, like I said, when you break into the sections, figure out the measure length. How long is this section and where is it located? Section 1, we're going to work with just the first 4 measures. All right, next you want to learn about your energy level. Right? What kind of energy am I trying to accomplish here? All right, personally, for this section, I want a very intimate energy level. I want to kind of keep things on the soft side, very personal, keep things very low so that I have plenty of space to grow throughout the rest of the piece. All right, so the next thing we need to learn is what texture are we working with? All right, as a reminder, texture is the number and types of layers that we're working with. If you know the specific name of your texture, go for it. This is technically a homophonic texture. It's melody plus chordal accompaniment plus bass line. I believe I've talked about that texture in a previous lesson. But for now, I'm going to focus just more on the individual layers. I have melody plus chords plus bass line, all right? Next, we want to figure out which one of these is the foreground, all right? My foreground, which is the material I want the audience to pay the most attention to, is definitely the melody. All right, I have not written an introduction to this piece yet. I have not written an outro for this piece yet. All I've done is sketch my ideas. All right, so I'm going to come up with those later, but for right now, in these 4 measures, the most important thing to stick out is the melody. All right, so after all of this, we want to do this for each section that we're going to work with. So let's go with section 2. Section 2 is going to be the next 4 measures. I'm splitting this first phrase into multiple sections because they have very different kind of energy levels and very different accompaniment styles. Instead of, like I said, the chords coming in softly and fading almost immediately away, we have a much more sustained kind of mooting chordal accompaniment. So then section number 2, let's answer our questions. This is measures 5 through 8. I want this still intimate, but the energy is growing. All right, the texture is still melody plus, I'll say sustained chords, plus bass line. And then the last thing, foreground equals melody. All right, and we want to do this, like I said, for every single section. All right, Jack says, this sounds like it'll be useful information for what I'm working on next. Also, just a good refresher for what we've already covered. Yes, exactly. So Jack is one of my students. Yes, this is incredibly helpful and similar. This is basically kind of the approach that I've shared here on YouTube a couple times. My approach to orchestrating new pieces of music. And this in particular is being used for a piece that I did not pay attention to my process for orchestrating. It was Halloween. I kind of wanted to rush through it. So now I'm paying the price and I'm having to go through and figure out why is this not working the way it needs to. Let's fix this one real quick. So that was section 2. And yeah, this is very essentially, like I said, is very closely related to the original process of arranging a piece of music and figuring out how to put it all together. The main difference is now I'm trying to reverse engineer what I've done and try to improve it. So section 3, all right, is going to be measures 9 through, and this one, let's actually go for the full phrase, 9 through 16. All right, let's move this up. Why did that get pushed back? There we go. So section 3 is measures 9 through 16. The energy level, intimate, but again, still growing. Possibly a little more intimate than section 2. All right, so texture here has actually changed. And this is going to be melody plus counter melody plus bass line. And the texture here, this is called a polythematic texture. This one I know I have talked about in a previous lesson on this channel. But still, the foreground is still the melody. What makes this tricky is we need to make sure that this melody, even though it's being accompanied by a counter melody, we can still separate the two as one being more important than the other. Our last one is going to be another phrase. So I guess it's not our last. Section 4 is measures 17 through 24, it looks like. 24. The energy equals much larger. Texture is melody, it looks like, plus chords. And yeah, looks like baseline, plus baseline. All right, and then our very last section. Oh, and we forgot to mention which one is most important, although at this point it kind of goes without saying. Foreground equals melody. Let's do capital M. So then the very last section, section number 5, is changing it up again. Section 5, which is measures 25 through 32. The texture is just a simple melody plus baseline. All right, we have one melodic idea done in octaves plus a baseline. Actually, it's a heterophonic melody. A heterophonic melody means it's a melody doubled by embellishments of itself. So if we look at this level right here on the viola, we can see that it deviates. But if we were to look a little bit closer, we'd see that it still hits each of the most important notes. We have an F down to a C. We have an F down to a C. And I have the viola switched to treble clef for the sake of this video because it's easier to read right off the bat. But if this were to be sheet music, of course, you would not want it to be treble clef. It would be alto clef. And then we have D to B, D, B. And we just fill the space. Instead of each of those notes being half notes, we kind of hit the notes and then we move on with some embellishments. So that's what makes it a heterophonic melody, is we are accompanying it with variations of itself. Then it looks like in violin, I actually did a little bit of chordal accompaniment. So there is a lot of stuff going on here. So I can see that this is probably going to be one of these sections that's troublesome. So texture, foreground equals melody, of course, and we forgot to do energy level. This is climactic and large. All right, we want this to be the most powerful moment in the music. So now that we've broken down our piece into several distinct sections, it's now time to start addressing why it's not working. All right, so we want to go through here. We want to find each of the sections that aren't really working and kind of address our problems. Let's try to go left to right just through each of the sections, see which ones are working, which ones aren't. Let's start with these first 4 measures. So we'll stop there. This section kind of works. I mean, of course, there's some stuff I could fix when we do it in Cubase, but the material is all kind of solid. This isn't throwing off any warning bells for me. Now, what I'm looking for is, first and foremost, I'm looking for the 3 pillars. And I have a video on that on YouTube. Those pillars are focus, separation, and balance. Starting with separation, we basically want to make sure every single layer is distinct. Can I tell the difference by listening between my melody and my accompaniment? Can I tell the difference between my chords and my bass line? And I just realized this is inconsistent. Let's fix this. Just to make this easier to work with, we'll switch to treble. All right, so is everything separated and kept nice and neat into their own unique layers? There are strategies for this. You can keep each layer distinct through pitch. You can keep them distinct through articulation type, through timbre, and through rhythm. Now, this is one of those things where it can be helpful to go through each of those one by one. Again, I do have a video that goes much more in depth on that. But this is one of those things that's really going to step out more when it's not working. Separation doesn't seem to be an issue here. Neither does focus seem to be an issue. It's very clear to see that my melody is the melody. All right? That my foreground is supposed to be my melody. And if we look at balance, balance is the idea that if we have separated each layer into its own idea, if we had made sure that between those layers it's very clear which one is the most important, then each layer should be kind of comparable power. The reason why is because if you have one layer that's much stronger than the others, it's going to make your whole arrangement sound out of balance and kind of muddy and unprofessional. So what we have here is we have our melody. Our melody focus is separate from our accompaniment and our bass line. All of these are very close to each other in pitch. All right? So we have middle C, and then we have a minor sixth above that is our first accompanimental note, our A minor. And below that, we have an E. So these are all very close to each other. But because we're maintaining the two biggest, most important things, the melody is rhythmically unique. It sticks out. Everything else is just being sustained. And because the melody actually changes more frequently, it introduces new notes, new rhythms, all that kind of stuff, it maintains more attention. So that's not really our issue. So part one seems to be working well. All right, don't need to change too much here. Let's move on to part two. All right, we're starting to run into a few issues here. Remember, section 2 is these last four measures. Section 1 was good, so let's delete that. Section 2, let's move this over and start addressing some things. Let's see what we can fix. All right, remember, you want to start with the three pillars. All right, let's start with separation. So as I mentioned, separation is this idea that does each layer in your music maintain its own individual identity? All right, does your melody clearly a melody? Are your chords clearly chords? And is your bass line clearly a bass line? There are times when you kind of want to blur the lines between those different layers. But most of the time, you want to make sure there's lots of clarity in which layer is responsible for which role. Now we can look at this through pitch, all right, articulation, timbre, and rhythm. Let's take a look and see if any of these are causing us issues. All right, the first one is we want to keep each of these layers separated by pitch. All right, so pitch. The melody, let's see where the melody goes, right? The lowest note on the melody is A3. A3 is the A just below middle C. It's this little guy right here. And the highest note is F4. All right, next, let's check out our bass line. Our bass line, our lowest note is D3, which is the D right here. It's almost an octave lower than middle C. So we'll say D3 to E3. All right, there's not a lot of difference, just the two notes. What we have going on here is there's no overlap. They're nice and separate. There's nothing wrong with our melody and our bass line. I just realized our melody is also up here. So I just remembered I doubled it in octaves. It's the solo viola and solo violin. So our lowest note on the violin is A4 to F5, which is this guy right here. So of course, it's doubling in octaves. Of course, it would be the same to F5. So far, no overlap. Each layer is nice and distinct. Let's check out the chords. All right, our chords, our lowest note, it seems, is E4. That's this guy on the very bottom of the treble clef, the last line. E4 is the E just above middle C. So we have E4, and our top note looks like G sharp which is this top guy here. But that doesn't happen until after everyone else is playing, so I'll put that in parentheses. The more useful one, the highest note that happens when the other layers are being used, is D5. All right, which is this guy right here, the top note right there. All right, so D5, and I'll say in parentheses G sharp 5. So let's look at this. All right, E4 to D5. All right, that's the E above middle C to the D, little more than an octave higher. D5, it looks like it overlaps a bit. All right, D5 definitely overlaps with our top melody, and E4 kind of dips into our melody. So if we were to add a nice piano for us to look at, let's just look at a blank staff, shall we? And let's move that up. So it's a little easier to visualize what I'm saying. So I'm not just throwing a bunch of, and where did these come from? Oh, this must be from the piano sketch I was working with. Let's delete the chord progression. We don't need that. Although it was a really fun chord progression to work with. So let's see, our melody goes A3 to F4. And it goes A4 to F5. This is our melody. If we look at our chords goes E4. Let's do this up here so we can have it. E4. I'm not used to teaching out of finale, so this is a little, bear with me. E4 to D5, all right? So what we see is these chords definitely overlap a lot with our melody, all right? If we were to even, actually it'd probably be easier to put this in voice 1. I don't know why it wasn't originally voice 1, but if we put it here, we can see the overlap much more closely. All right, so these bigger notes are the range of our chords. The other two are the melodies and their distinct octaves. We see there's a lot of overlap. Because there is so much overlap between the two, this can actually cause some issues in the clarity of our sound. If we really need to, we can try and change this, and this will help a little bit. But that's going to be a bit tricky, because I kind of like the idea of having my chords being sandwiched by 2 octaves of the melody. Just because there's overlap doesn't mean it's necessarily going to cause issues. It can, but it won't necessarily cause issues. And I like the idea, so I don't want it to cause issues. So I'm going to keep pushing and see if there's something else we can work with. All right, so we've looked at pitch. Let's check out articulation. All right. Essentially, are we using different articulations, different playing techniques to bring these voices to mind? Again, not really. All right. I'm using sustained notes in both cases. They're both kind of sustained, a little bit of legato up here. There's not a lot separating. All right. No big separation. All right. So it's not looking good. All right. It looks like separation might be my issue. It might be why I'm having these issues here. With the clarity in section 2. But let's continue. We know that separation could be an issue. We know that articulation could also be an issue. The next one is rhythm. And this one is not an issue. All right. The idea is, are we keeping our ideas separate rhythmically? This is very true. Our melody has a very distinctly rhythmically active identity. It uses different notes, different note values. It moves all over the place. This is great. This helps separate the ideas distinctly. All right. The last idea is timbre and tone color. Essentially, are we using different sounds for each layer? And again, yes, but no. All right. They're not different because it's all strings, but this is a piece written for a string orchestra. They are different because within the string sections, there are different sounds available. Here we're using something called divisi. Let's say I have 14 second violins. Divisi says 7 of you play this, the other 7 play this. And that's what I've done. I've divided our chords across 7 violins each. Now the sound of 7 violins is very different from the sound of a solo string player. So these should step out a little bit. But it's not that dramatic. It's not that powerful. We're still running with issues. If you have seen my video on the 3 pillars of great orchestration, you'll notice that with separation, the key is the more of these 4 ideas you have, creating differences, creating separation between your ideas, the more separate the ideas are going to sound. The more you have in common, the more they're going to sound uniquely kind of joined together. So here we have rhythm and timbre separating the ideas, but pitch and articulation are not. I need to find a way to kind of help these stick out even more. I could try doubling down on the timbre and just make it a really different timbre. Maybe having the second violin players use mutes. I could try having them use sol tasto, which is they bow closer to the fingerboard, and it creates a much glassier, kind of a warmer, well, not glassier, warmer, kind of softer, more intimate sound. I could use sol ponticello, which is the opposite, bowing closer to the bridge, which creates kind of a colder, creepier sound. But in reality, I'm thinking I'm probably just going to have to separate by pitch a little bit more. Perhaps I could swap these chords out a little bit more and have the bottom line go up higher. Maybe you guys have some ideas. Let me know what you think I should do here. Looks like I've got a couple of comments. Jack, very John Williams-like. Yes, actually, yes. I got a lot of inspiration for this piece from the immolation scene in Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. Massive Star Wars nerd. I have done multiple marathons with friends and cousins before, watching all the movies back to back. Can't do that anymore. There's too many of them. But, yeah, I'm just a major Star Wars nerd. And I suppose I feel I have that Star Wars nerd desire to prove myself to you, to show that I am a Star Wars nerd, but that's not the point of this. So I'm going to move on. Yes. So, yeah, it's Star Wars inspired from John Williams. Different articulations are definitely noticeable in the end piece. Legato and sustain are nice, but marcato and harmonics, sol tasto, all send the piece into the orchestral. Harmonics. That's something. I hadn't thought of harmonics. I was thinking of the mute, and I thought, no, because then we could use the mute, actually. Because the second strings don't need to play in the next section. The problem is I kind of want them to crescendo, and mutes don't work as well if you move beyond mezzo piano. Not on the strings, at least. Harmonics could be very fun. Could be tricky, though. I am not as fluent with writing harmonics. I could use touch 4, but that would probably limit me a little bit. Yeah, changing the articulation could definitely work. Let's give this another listen to real quick, actually, just to get it a little more fresh in my ears. The piano's probably going to play up here. Try to ignore that. Oh, finale is doing something funky. Then the chords are up there. You know what? Let's mute the piano. I have no idea what finale was just doing with that funky screen glitch. Hopefully, it doesn't keep doing that. On second listening, actually, that doesn't seem quite as bad. A couple things that I did want to note real quick is I don't know why I brought the basses in just randomly. Let's drop this and just play that E on the cellos instead of the basses. There's no need for that. Who am I doing that for? However, let's still get the mezzo forte. Let's get the dynamic markings going, the hairpins. Even though I don't like using hairpins across too many measures. Let's do mezzo forte here. And this one will have a shorter hairpin, just these last few. Let's listen to it one more time. right, so I'm falling into that trap where the more times you listen to something, the more you enjoy it. And I'm starting to wonder, what if we use the fifth forbidden technique for separation, which is just dynamics? All right, you can separate your ideas by making them quieter. What if I don't do a crescendo with the strings and keep them in piano or softly playing? That could work. The issue is that could cause problems balance-wise down the line. Let's leave it for now. I know I'm going to kick myself on this later. But if this is it's another learning opportunity. If you get to a point where you're struggling to make changes somewhere, maybe you're like me and you like the idea too much. I love the idea of having these chords being sandwiched between two soloists. You can always just leave it for now, move on. We've only addressed separation at this point. We can also check focus and balance. And then if the three pillars aren't enough, we can always move on to something else. Called issues of clarity is what we will be calling them. So, for the sake of indulging my artistic wishes at the moment of just wanting to work with this kind of texture, let's test something out. Let's try some other things first, starting with focus. And focus is the idea that our melody, our foreground material, needs to command the most attention. Our foreground material in this section is the melody, as we noted earlier. And there are a couple different things. The first one is changing material. All right, so if you've seen my video on the 3 pillars of great orchestration, you know that the most powerful tool you have at making a layer stick out as the most important is to give it changing material. Changing material could be something new, maybe a new instrument, a new voice, a new register. It could just be changing rhythms. Here we have that, all right? Here we have 2 things that are big changes. The first one is I add another instrument. I've added a solo violin player, playing an octave higher than we were just 4 measures earlier. I have also made sure that the melody is playing a unique rhythm. All right, this rhythm, the note values change more frequently than down here. All right, the chords are just the same note value, a half note over and over again. The bass line is the same value, whole notes over and over again. So we do have, I'll just say, yep, we got changing material. So that helps the melody maintain focus. The next one is activity, which essentially the most rhythmically active group layer has the most attention. All right, again, melody is the most rhythmically active, so yep, we got that going for us. And the last one is pitch, which is all things being left equal. The highest notes will demand the most attention. All right, which I don't know why I wrote down the definition for that one, but none of the others. And again, is our melody the highest note? And again, yep. So we have all of these. Our melody is doing a good job commanding the foreground. So now the issue is so separation could be an issue. Focus is definitely not an issue. My kind of last chance here is balance. This is the idea, is my balance maintained? Does each layer have comparable power? So let's say here, melody equals solo violin plus solo viola. That's a very intimate setting. All right, that is a very small setting. All right, very small power. The chords equals violin 2 in divisi. All right, 7 chords each, or 7 voices each. That could be a problem. It doesn't have to be. Any soloist has the potential to overpower an entire section of their same instrument. That is perfectly fine. If it was not possible, we would not have concertos or other types of music that feature soloists. Shouldn't be an issue. Could potentially be one. And the last one is the bass line, is cello, which is a full section of 12 players, each playing the bass line. So we've got some different sizes here. All right, we've got some very interesting size changes here. This might be the issue, and I remember putting up here. Balance. So, what could be the problem? Well, right now, the bass line by itself has the greatest capacity for power. That could be overbalanced. That could be more powerful than the others. The chords have the possibility of comparable power. Essentially what we've got 3 different types of instrumentation sizes. And this could cause some issues. This might be where I'm having trouble here. There are a couple solutions to this. I could just switch to a violin section joining. And instead of having solo viola and solo violin, I could go solo viola doubling a solo violin. Or I could switch from solo viola to a viola section and then joining with violin. Let's give it one more listen. All right, let's see what's going to happen. If any ideas jump out. You guys see me struggling. That's because I'm doing this for real. This isn't pre-planned. Oh. Alright, well, I guess it works now. Alright, switching that dynamic for the second violin just made it click for some reason. So all of this was for nothing. That's frustrating. But it's life. Alright, a lot of writing music is being very frustrated all the time. It's fulfilling and wonderful work. I love it. Wouldn't trade it for anything else. But the number of times where I've just been stressed out by a piece I'm working on is immeasurable. Yeah, so apparently it works now. All right, we don't need to worry about these pillars or anything. Changing the dynamic for the violin too was all we needed. This second part now magically works. Maybe it wouldn't with real musicians. It could. The interesting thing about the violin section, or just the violin family, which is the violins, violas, celli, and double basses, is they have a tremendous amount of flexibility. All right, more so than any other section. 16 violins can match a flute playing mezzo piano. All right, an entire violin section. If you tell them you need to play this mezzo piano, the flute player, you need to play this mezzo piano, well, that might be a bit of a stretch. If they're playing harmonics, definitely. But any one flute player can always be matched in dynamic level and volume by any one string section. It's one of the great strengths of the string section is to be able to be so flexible in the dynamic levels. That's not the same for the brass or the winds. No trumpet player is ever going to be able to balance the softness of a flute player. That's speaking as a trumpet player. It's just not going to happen. All right? So all of this I'm explaining to you as much as myself, trying to convince myself this is okay and I'm not cheating and I'm not just taking the easy way out. So I'm going to say I'll accept this. Yes, I know the theory. I know it works. I know it should be fine. And I don't plan on having this played by real musicians anyways, so it's okay for me to play around just a little bit. Looks like we're getting some more comments. Michael, hello. Thank you for your streams. Thank you. My pleasure. I love doing this stuff. I love the work that I do. I love working with all of you guys. So thank you for stopping by. Aditya, yes, just simple dynamics. Yeah. I tend to overthink it sometimes. Jack, that'll never happen to me. I'll never get frustrated about peace or get writer's block. Baby composer, Jack. Yes! I know. Everybody, when you're starting out, you're like, this is lovely. This is wonderful. I am an artist. I have passion for my work. And then the moment something doesn't work, you get so frustrated. You get so angry with yourself at times. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. But Section 2 now magically works. It was just the dynamics all along. Let's check Section 3, shall we? And keeping with tradition, let's listen to what we've got so far. cannot hear the violas. That's issue number 1 right off the bat. Alright. So let's give this a look at. Alright, so first off, you'll see I have written tutti above my staff and the violins. Alright, that is not just because I'm immature and I think tutti sounds funny, but because tutti actually means together. And anytime you finish a solo statement, here it said solo means only one of you play. Alright, there's 14 of you, but only one of the violins is actually going to play this part. It's always going to be the principal player, or the first violin. Tutti means, alright, it's done, solo's over, all of you, back to work, kind of thing. So here we have the entire violin section playing together. This is going to change our texture. Not just in the layers, because this is clearly a change from homophonic, which is chords plus melody plus bass line, to polythematic, which is melody plus counter melody plus bass line. But also in texture in terms of like the sound and the way it's going to be. One violin player sounds very different from 16 first violin players. Next, we have the violas are now also playing. Why does it say unison? It should say tutti. Or is that unison? Yeah. Unison is what it should have said for the violins. Violin 2, so maybe I copied and pasted it at some point. But violin 2, as you mentioned, as you saw, was playing, where is it? Technique text. Tutti, where is tutti? There it is, right after solo. All right, so this is divisi. It says, all right, there's 14 of you guys. 7 of you play the top note, 7 of you play the bottom note. If they were to start playing, which they would after this, you'd see Arco, I also had a disastrous playthrough with trying to use some con legno, which is hitting the strings with your wooden bow, I should say. The wooden side of your bow as a violin. Because I was playing with something like a timepiece, a ticking, did not work. So that's kind of left over from that. But I want to say unison to say it's the end of a divisi there. But that's ahead of the time. Now I'm starting to get lost in like the minutia of notating music, and I don't plan on printing this off of sheet music, so I don't know why I'm focusing on that. Anywho, so we have a new texture here. We have melody, commenter, bass line. All right, so I want this to be intimate, but again, it should be growing, possibly a little bit more intimate than section 2. Meaning that maybe we went super intimate, a little bit bigger, then maybe fall back a little bit. On second thoughts, I think I'd rather this be a larger, and then have section 4, this next one, come back down and feel more intimate than section 3. But we've got our new texture, we've got our foreground and our melody. First things first, that's just not working, are these dynamics. All right, we've got solo violin. Let's mark this just because it's the start of a new phrase. And it was mezzo piano. I'm wondering if it was just a playing issue. But we've got the bass line is playing nice and powerfully. And if I wanted to, I kind of want a bit of a breathing with the cello section. So get louder, then get softer. One of the best ways to do this is with simple bowing techniques. So I'm going to take this first one, and I'm going to say, do an up bow, which is different from what you would normally do. But where are the bowing marks? I don't usually get too specific with my bowings. Here we go. Up bow. All right, normally the first note of a beat is a down bow. You start with the start of the bow that you're holding, and you move down. An up bow makes you start with the tip of the strings bow, and it moves up. Since there's more weight in your hand than at the very tip of the bow, it comes with a slight increase in volume. And so telling the strings, I want you to do something different than usual. I want you to start with an up bow instead of a down bow. Kind of brings home the idea to them that I want this kind of breathing feel. Come in a little louder, come back a little bit softer. Kind of get a breathe in, breathe out feel. I just like the idea of using that for my bass line. Let's do mezzo piano and rung tool. For the bass lines, again, this isn't absolutely necessary, and sometimes it can actually be confusing, but my own personal style for dynamics, I always like to have, at least in complex textures like this, the primary melody slightly louder. So let's give this a quick listen to again. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh wait, no, I already skipped it. My bad. I wonder if I forgot to change, because this shouldn't be giving me issues. Why are they so quiet? Let's go to utilities, change instrument. Aha, it's solo viola, should be viola section. And then, of course, it changed clefs, which I really should be using the clef that the viola players would play, but I don't want to. So let's just keep writing this way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So, my issue with this section, because I can already tell the way it sounds, it feels too thin for my liking. And I know that's all right. I know I can move around. And by thin, I mean, we have a thicker texture here. If we look at the previous phrase, we've got 1 octave for the melody. Between that, we have chords split across 2 voices. So that's a total of 3 voices so far. Then another melody, an octave lower. That's 4 voices total. And then the bass line. That's 5 voices. Then when we switch over here, boom, just 3. And personally, I feel like it detracts a little bit, especially when this section is supposed to be more full, more powerful. One thing I could do to this that would require a little bit of effort, more than we have time for, is I could take this counter melody and I could make it chordal. By that, I mean I can go, and for this I actually will have to change the clef so I have space. And I would essentially just say, all right, here's another note underneath this. Here's another note underneath this. And then, I have it in. Why? Why did Finale do this? I don't know. I must have messed up at some point. I almost used a word I shouldn't use on a live stream. All right, secrets out. I tend to swear quite a bit. I clean it up for YouTube. I don't know why. It's just part of my vocabulary. So, hope that doesn't shock you at all. But I would rather not be demonetized, so I clean up my language, my vocabulary a little bit while I'm on screen. I'm oversharing at this point. Sorry about that. But I'm frustrated because, if you'll notice, it added another voice, meaning that I now have basically 2 different parts written on the same part. That's not what I want. I don't know why Finale defaulted to voice number 2. That's what's frustrating me. It's technical difficulties. But what I want to do, essentially, is just, I'll just use the short keys. I could double the entire second voice like this. And then what I want to do is just make sure that these new notes I add belong to the underlying harmony. So I'm starting to regret deleting the chord progression. Fortunately, I have it written down in a notebook. So I could do that. That would definitely fill out the texture a little bit. Give it a little bit of a wider, thicker sound. Yeah, we'll see. Unfortunately, I don't have time to do that right now. Let's talk about the things in the lesson plan that I didn't get to today. The first one is, of course, we talked about the 3 pillars. If you go through the 3 pillars, like I did for the first one, and you didn't find anything that fit right away, there are still some things you can look for. And these are the issues of clarity, is what I like to call them. Issues of clarity. These are things that even though you've got your balance, separation, and focus figured out, they can still make your sound a little bit muddy. The first one is pitch distribution and maintaining clarity. All right, this is an issue that I'm kind of having with that second section, but we fixed it by changing the dynamic level so I didn't have to go this far. But the idea here is that sometimes you have separated two layers. In my case, the melody and the chords did not overlap. At no point did they cross voices where the melody dipped lower than the high note of the melody harmony. They were always distinctly separate. But sometimes their ranges just have too much overlap, and it just doesn't work. So sometimes maybe I'd have to drop the chords an octave or raise them an octave or do something to give a little bit more space between the two. The next one is an issue of harmonic limitation and clarity. And the idea here is that harmonic material very, very quickly gets overrun with overtones. If you aren't familiar with what overtones are, I do have a video on the overtone series, and I'll be dropping another one this week, so keep an eye out for it. But the idea is that harmonic material, if there's too much of it, can very quickly muddy up the sound of your music. So you want to try and limit yourself to just 3 distinct harmonic voices while you're working. One is the group focused on the bass line, one is the group focused on closed voicings in the upper registers, and the third one is the third optional layer where you can have arpeggios, ostinati, something like that. But you don't want to go too overboard and have too many groups. And the last one is melodic limitation and clarity, which is the idea that the more melodic material you have, the less clean your music will sound. And so you want to try and limit yourself to just 2 melodic voices, like a melody plus a counter melody, or melody plus a moving bass line, or something. The moment you move past 2, it starts to become muddy. It starts to lose clarity unless you're super careful. And the general rule is if you need to move beyond 2, each progressive addition should be simpler and more repetitive than the last. So the melody should be the most unique. Counter melody should be a little less unique, a little less novel, a little less rhythmically new. The third one, maybe a moving bass line, should be the most simple and repetitive. Then if you had to go even further than that, again, more and more repetitive, more and more simple to help maintain that clarity. As you can see, I don't have any recommendations for continued learning. I have not had a chance to put down the homework yet. But the homework assignment is, well, I guess, yeah, just revisit an old piece. All right, so I'll say that right now. Revisit an old piece and see how you can clean it up. All right, simple, not going to put a lot of work into it. Next one is send me a message, email, or comment about which topic you would like to see me cover next week. All right, so with that, I'll stay on if anybody has any more questions. But I should probably get to work fixing this up because, like I said, it is something that's technically I'm supposed to be doing for a commission. And I should probably get this fixed up. But yeah, any questions? You guys can see I play Far Cry, or I used to. I don't know if it's still in the game on the computer anymore. I had to delete like all of my games to make room for my software, sadly. Here we go. So yeah, let's check out the comments real quick. Oh, thanks for there we go. I did, yeah. Wow, just amazed that a simple dynamic change can have such a drastic effect. It can. It really can. Let's see. And Leslie, your lessons are amazing. Thank you, Leslie. I really appreciate it. So yeah, I think that's where we'll leave it off. Doesn't look like there are any more comments, any questions. As usual, let me know what you think. Let me know what you'd like to see me cover in future videos, future streams. And yeah, I will see you all next week. Keep studying, keep working hard, and keep writing new music, my friends. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.